An entire nation was transformed into a watery nightmare in a matter of hours, and what Cyclone Ditwala just did to Sri Lanka represents one of the most catastrophic natural disasters the island has witnessed in modern history, with destruction so complete that satellite imagery shows entire neighborhoods simply erased from existence. But here's what makes this disaster genuinely terrifying. At 3:42 a.m. on November 28, 2025, the cyclone slammed into Sri Lanka's southwestern coast with winds roaring at over 80 kilometers per hour, snapping trees and sending tin roofs spinning through the air, while rain hammered the coastline in sheets so dense that visibility dropped to near zero. How within minutes seawater surged over breakwaters, flooding low-lying neighborhoods before most families could reach higher ground, while power lines toppled, plunging entire districts into blackout. Why more than 180,000 people were forced into 1,094 emergency shelters across the country, with many arriving with nothing but the clothes on their backs, having lost their homes to floodwaters overnight, and the devastating reality that the districts of Kandi, Badulla, and Matale in the central highlands recorded more than 500 millimeters of rain in less than 2 days, causing entire hillsides to give way, with walls of mud and shattered trees crashing through villages below. Once you understand why Dr. Nimal Pereira, the chief meteorologist, said the storm's eye made landfall just south of Kalutara, bringing maximum rainfall and wind bands directly over Colombo and Gampaha, why the latest figures from the Disaster Management Center confirm more than 330 dead, with hundreds still missing as rescue operations run around the clock, and what it means that at least 7 major hospitals, including Colombo National Hospital, are partially or fully inundated, with emergency rooms overwhelmed and backup generators failing, while medical staff form human chains to carry patients to higher floors. You'll realize this is a disaster that pushed an entire nation to the edge of total collapse and revealed the terrifying new reality of climate-intensified weather events that can drown entire cities before dawn breaks. The unimaginable just struck Sri Lanka with a violence that transformed the island in hours. Entire districts drowned as Cyclone Ditwala unleashed record-breaking floods, and a historic landfall that forced a mass exodus into overcrowded emergency facilities. Behind the chaos and the shocking statistics lies a story far bigger than numbers and breaking headlines could capture. What really happened in those first critical hours? And how close did the island actually come to total systemic collapse? Brown water surges through the heart of Colombo, swallowing entire neighborhoods in minutes with a speed that defied comprehension. Streets that just hours earlier bustled with morning traffic now lie beneath a silent churning tide that moves with terrifying purpose. Rooftops have become islands of desperation. Families huddle together, waving frantically for help as rescue boats struggle against powerful currents below. Shouts echo across the water, punctuated by the wail of distant sirens that seem impossibly far away for those stranded and waiting.
1 million people who have been forced from their homes by devastating flooding.
$1.4 million people affected overall with the flood and the landslide that has occurred.
In Gampaha, the familiar grid of city blocks vanishes under a vast sheet of floodwater, with only the tallest buildings still visible above the deluge. Bridges that connected communities for generations collapse into swirling debris, while cars and buses drift half-submerged in what were once main roads, carrying thousands of commuters daily. Drone footage reveals the true terrifying scale of destruction. District after district completely erased by water, with only scattered clusters of stranded people signaling desperately from rooftops and upper floors. Entire districts are cut off completely from rescue efforts. The only movement now is the slow crawl of rescue boats navigating treacherous conditions and the frantic gestures of those left behind, hoping someone will see them. Amid the chaos, cameras linger on single families marooned on their roofs, silent pleas for help in a city transformed beyond all recognition in the span of a few hours. At exactly 3:42 in the morning on November 28, 2025, Cyclone Ditwala slammed into Sri Lanka's southwestern coast with its full devastating force, unleashing destruction in the darkness before dawn when most people were sleeping and unprepared. Landfall was sudden and extraordinarily violent. Winds roared at speeds exceeding 80 kilometers per hour, snapping mature trees like twigs and sending tin roofs spinning through the air like deadly projectiles. Within minutes, rain hammered the coastline in sheets so dense that visibility dropped to near zero, making any movement treacherous. Seawater surged over breakwaters that were supposed to protect coastal communities, flooding low-lying neighborhoods before most families could even process what was happening and reach higher ground. The flooding spread with terrifying speed, moving from the coast inland in minutes rather than hours. Power lines toppled under the assault, plunging entire districts into complete blackout that made rescue efforts exponentially more difficult. The Sri Lanka Meteorological Department had tracked Ditwala's approach for days, issuing warnings and advisories. But few could have imagined this scale of destruction would materialize so quickly. Dr. Nimal Pereira, the chief meteorologist, explained that the storm's eye made landfall just south of Kalutara, bringing maximum rainfall intensity and the strongest wind bands directly over Colombo and Gampaha, the nation's most densely populated areas. Blackouts and collapsed infrastructure followed immediately in the cyclone's wake. As the storm pushed relentlessly inland, rivers swelled dramatically with runoff cascading down from the central hills, setting off a catastrophic chain reaction of flooding that swept through city after city with devastating efficiency. Meteorologists mapped the storm's path in real time, tracing a corridor of total devastation stretching from the coast deep into the country's mountainous heartland. Inside the packed halls of government schools converted to emergency shelters, families gather on thin mats, clutching whatever belongings they manage to save in those frantic minutes of evacuation. The air is thick with exhaustion and barely controlled worry. Children sleep in rows beside strangers, while volunteers move between the crowds distributing bottled water and bread, trying to meet the most basic needs of thousands simultaneously. According to the Disaster Management Center, more than 180,000 people have sought refuge at 1,094 emergency shelters established across the country. Many arrived with absolutely nothing but the clothes on their backs, having lost their homes completely to the floodwaters overnight. Shelter coordinators explain that every hour brings new arrivals in waves, whole families, elderly couples, mothers with newborns, each one desperate for any safe place to rest. In one corner of a shelter, a mother wipes tears from her face as she tries desperately to comfort her frightened children. The scale is completely overwhelming, yet staff and volunteers work without pause, determined to provide whatever comfort they can manage in the chaos. The constant hum of voices, the shuffle of feet, and the distant sound of rain still falling paint a portrait of a nation suddenly uprooted, clinging to hope inside these crowded walls. In the central highlands, the disaster took an even more terrifying form. Entire hillsides gave way with a deafening roar, sending walls of mud and shattered trees crashing through villages below with unstoppable force. The districts of Kandi, Badulla, and Matale bore the worst of this devastation, where rain gauges recorded more than 500 millimeters of precipitation in less than 2 days, an almost incomprehensible amount. Roads that once wound picturesquely through tea estates vanished beneath heaps of red earth, their paths completely erased by massive landslides. In the early morning hours, families were caught as their homes buckled and slid down slopes, swept away with nowhere to run and no time to escape. A hydrologist from the University of Peradeniya, standing at the edge of a fresh landslide scar, explained that these mountains were already saturated with water before Ditwala even arrived. One night of this kind of torrential rain, and the ground simply let go catastrophically. Rescue teams struggled desperately to reach the worst-hit villages, blocked by collapsed roads and dangerously unstable ground that could give way at any moment. In Matale, entire communities remain completely cut off from outside help. Their only contact with the outside world is occasional static-laced radio calls for urgent assistance. The highlands, usually a place of green calm and natural beauty, have been transformed into a deadly trap demanding a scale of rescue operation few could have imagined necessary. Military convoys push through waist-deep water, headlights sweeping over lines of stranded villagers as the first coordinated rescue wave surges into the disaster zone with whatever resources can be mobilized. The Sri Lankan Armed Forces deployed over 24,000 personnel across all 25 districts, sending Navy boats and Coast Guard teams into neighborhoods where roads have completely vanished beneath the flood. Army trucks, their beds packed with evacuees, roll continuously toward makeshift shelters while police and volunteers form human chains to pull survivors from submerged homes. The Disaster Management Center releases increasingly grim figures with each update. More than 330 confirmed dead, with hundreds still missing, and that number expected to rise significantly. Rescue operations run around the clock as helicopters hover precariously over marooned villages, lowering baskets to families trapped by rising water with no other means of escape. The National Operations Commander addresses the Emergency Command Center with steady voice, laying out the overwhelming scale. Tens of thousands mobilized, every available resource committed, and the death toll rising by the hour. Maps on command center walls flicker with constant new reports. Entire provinces remain cut off from communication, and the struggle to reach them grows more urgent and more dangerous with each passing minute. Floodwaters breach the ground floor of Colombo National Hospital as backup generators fail catastrophically, plunging critical wards into darkness. Doctors and nurses move by flashlight, improvising desperately with battery-powered monitors while water creeps higher along the corridors, threatening equipment and patients. In Badulla, medical staff form human chains to carry patients to higher floors as the river outside completely swallows the hospital entrance. Ambulances unable to cross submerged streets line up along the last dry stretch of road, waiting for a break in the rain that never comes. The Ministry of Health reports that at least 7 major hospitals are partially or fully inundated, with emergency rooms overwhelmed and critical supplies running dangerously low. Health Secretary Dr. Molini Pereira confirms that several facilities are operating without power or clean water, creating impossible conditions for treating the injured. She explains they're coordinating patient transfers and requesting immediate air support for the most urgent cases. Helicopters hover over the flooded city, lowering harnesses to lift neonatal incubators and trauma patients to safety. Each flight carries another life snatched from rising water, but the list of those still waiting grows longer by the hour. Relief helicopters thunder overhead as the first wave of international aid touches down in Sri Lanka. On the tarmac at Bandaranaike International Airport, teams from India and Malaysia unload crates marked with Red Cross emblems, medical kits, water purification units, and sacks of rice. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs confirms the arrival of 80 specialized rescuers and over 20 tons of emergency supplies, with more shipments waiting at regional ports. Logistics officers race to clear runways and secure transport, while battered roads and collapsed bridges force convoys to reroute through flooded back streets, adding hours to journeys that should take minutes. The National Relief Coordinator tells assembled press that every hour absolutely counts, that they're prioritizing the most isolated districts in what has become a desperate race against time and rising water. Looping satellite imagery captures Cyclone Ditwala spiraling over Sri Lanka, its dense rain bands sweeping across the island with devastating precision. NASA analysts overlay rainfall accumulation maps showing deep red zones stretching across the central highlands, where 500 millimeters fell in less than 48 hours. Drone footage time-stamped and geotagged reveals the before and after reality. Entire neighborhoods erased, farmlands replaced by brown lakes, roads invisible beneath layers of mud. The tally grows starker with every assessment. Over 15,000 homes completely destroyed, confirmed by rapid assessment teams cross-checking satellite imagery with ground reports. Each data point sharpens the inescapable reality. Recovery will not be measured in days or weeks, but in years of rebuilding. That's it for today, folks. See you in the next video.